Good day, Deep and Word family. Welcome to day 153 of our Bible study review. Today we're closing out the book of Jeremiah and we're going through chapters 50 through 52. Now, yesterday we left off with Jeremiah prophesying judgment against the surrounding nations of Israel, and now we see the culmination. We're seeing that Jeremiah is prophesying against Babylon, this great world empire that's conquering all of these other nations. They get puffed up in pride and eventually they will be brought down low as well. So let's read. This is a 3-page long chapter, so I'm not going through all of these verses, but I will pinpoint certain verses and let you know from where I am reading. So let's start from verse 1. It says, "The word of Yahweh spoke against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans by Jeremiah the prophet." He says, "Declare among the nations and publish and set up a standard. Do not conceal it, but say, Babylon has been captured, Bel has been humiliated, and Marduk has been broken into pieces. Her idols have been humiliated, her images have been broken into pieces. For out of the north there comes up a nation against her, which will make her desolate, and no one will dwell in it." And so we know, if you have ever read the book of Daniel, that the next nation that comes up after Babylon to conquer them, the next world empire, it is the Persians and the Medes as a whole. And that is who embarrasses and brings Babylon down low. Now I'm going to be reading from verses 4 through 6, and this pivots now to talking to Israel, comforting Israel now. And it says, "In those days, and at that time, says Yahweh, the sons of Israel will come, they and the children of Judah together. They will go along weeping as they go and seek Yahweh, their Elohim. They will ask for the way to Zion with their faces in its direction. They will come that they may join themselves to Yahweh in a perpetual covenant that will not be forgotten." So that leads me back to Jeremiah 31:31, where he says he will do this great work so that Israel will not fail again. But let's keep reading from verse 6. It says, "My people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have caused them to go astray. They have turned them away on the mountains. They have gone from mountain to hill and have forgotten their resting place. All who found them have devoured them." So all who were seeking them found them, but they did not find their own Elohim. So now let's go over to verse 8. It says, "Wander away out of the midst of Babylon and go out of the land of the Chaldeans and be as the male goats before the flocks. For I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations from the north country, and they shall set themselves in array against her. From there she shall be taken captive." And so we see that this might serve as a comfort to Israel because they're about to be taken off to Babylonian captivity. But then he says they will be judged and they will be brought out to captivity. And again, the book of Daniel goes into details about the empires that, are raised after Babylon, the ones that fall. And he tells you the last kingdom, the last empire standing in the time that the Messiah would come. And it also talks about how that last kingdom would come to power in the last days. And that kingdom is Rome. Okay, so then we are going to go to verse 11, and it's back to speaking to Babylon. It says, "Because you were glad, because you rejoiced, O you destroyers of my heritage, because you have grown fat as the heifer at the grass and bellow as bulls, your mother will surely be humiliated." Now, the mother is Babylon. We know that Zion is also called the mother, right? Referred to the children of Israel as her children. And so Babylon is spoken of as the same way. Babylon is the mother, and her children are the ones who are born unto her, right? And he says, "She who bore you will be ashamed. She will be the least of nations." And it says, "A wilderness, a dry land, and a desert. Because of the wrath of Yahweh, she will not be inhabited, but shall be wholly desolate. Everyone who goes by Babylon will be astonished and hiss at all of her wounds." And so we know I've already shared the videos before, but if you need to see it again, I will gladly show it to you. Babylon, which is currently in modern day Iraq, is completely desolate. It is a den of jackals. It is a place where wild animals dwell. All right. So the word of Yah does not fall short at all. It never has, and it never will. Verse 14 is the charge against Babylon. And this is what Yahweh, is speaking through Jeremiah to all of the surrounding nations to Babylon. And it says, put yourselves in a battle array against Babylon all around. All you who bend the bow, shoot at her and spare no arrows, for she has sinned against Yahweh. Now let's go over 14 verses later to verse 28 and let's read. It says, there is the sound of those who flee and escape out of the land of Babylon to declare in Zion the vengeance of Yahweh our Elohim, the vengeance of his temple. Call together the archers against Babylon, all you who bend the bow and camp against it all around. Let no one escape. Recompense her according to her work, according to all that she has done. Do it to her, for she has been proud against Yahweh, against the Holy One of Israel. And then verse 31 says, I am against you, O most proud, says Yahweh, the Elohim of hosts, for your day has come, the time when I will punish you. The most proud will stumble and fall, and no one will raise him up. And I will kindle a fire in his cities, and it will devour him all around. Verse 33, it says, thus says Yahweh Sabaoth, the sons of Israel and the sons of Judah were oppressed altogether, and all who took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. So there are several of the tribes of Israel that are dispersed in the nations, and it says that those nations refuse to let his people go, right? Doesn't that reflect the time of Exodus when Pharaoh refused to let the people go? But it says their Redeemer is strong. Yahweh Sabaoth is his name. And then if we go over to verse 40, we see the ultimate judgment of Babylon. He says, as Elohim overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighboring cities, says Yahweh, so no man will abide there, nor will any son of man dwell in it. He does not promise to restore Babylon whatsoever. It still lays waste as a desolation. And he says he's never going to recover that area. And now 51, I'm going to start reading from verse 1 and just, share a few verses within the chapter because this is further talking about the destruction of Babylon. The previous chapter was the judgment. Now this is the specific destruction. And it says, I will raise up against Babylon and against those who dwell in Leb Kamai, the spirit of the destroyer, and I will send foreigners to Babylon, and they may winnow her and empty her land. And then over here in verse 7, it says, Babylon has been a golden cup in the hand of Yahweh that made all of the earth drunk. So he was using Babylon to discipline his own people and to discipline the other proud nations. But then, of course, Babylon grew proud as well. And so it says, the nations have drunk of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her. Take balm for her pain. Perhaps she may be healed. We applied healing to Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her and let us each go into his own country, for her judgment reaches to heaven, and it is lifted up even to the skies. And if we go down to the middle of verse 11, it says, Yahweh has raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes. That's who comes next after Babylon. And he says, for his device is against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of Yahweh, the vengeance of his temple. Now, an important thing to note that may serve as a connector with this judgment right here is that when we get into the book of Daniel, we will see that Belshazzar has a feast, and it's during this feast that he takes the holy instruments, right, that were taken from Jerusalem and placed in Babylon, but he uses the holy instruments for worship of Yah, and he uses it for this big feast that he has, and he is puffed up and he is proud, and it is at that moment when the handwriting shows up on the wall and the judgment of Babylon is pronounced right then and there. That king, he dies that night, and the Persians and the Medes take over that night. And so I believe this is a connector because they are taking the holy things of Yah and they are, desecrating it for their pagan worship, right? And they're doing it proudly. And the king of Babylon at that time, Belshazzar, he does it proudly. And it's that night where he is brought low. So I believe this is very important to connect to this part of this judgment right here. So now let's go to verse 24, and it says, I will render to Babylon and to all of the inhabitants of Chaldea all of their evil that they have done in Zion in your sight, says Yahweh. I am against you, O destroying mountain, says Yahweh, who destroys all of the earth, and I will stretch out my hand against you and roll you down from the rocks and will make you a burned mountain. They will not take of you a stone for a corner or a stone for foundations, but you will be desolate forever. So he says, I will not restore you. And if you watch the attached video in the description box, you will see that there are cornerstones. If they wanted to rebuild it, they could use it and put it in its foundation, but there is no rebuilding of Babylon. It is desolate to this day. And now let's go over to verse 59 throughout the rest of the chapter and conclude something that happens before the end of Zedekiah's reign. Now, this takes place in the 4th year of Zedekiah's reign. Now, Zedekiah was not always rebelling against Nebuchadnezzar. During the earliest part of his reign, he was subservient to him, but it's during the last part of his reign that he started to rebel. King Nebuchadnezzar got wind of it, and then he put an end to his rebellion. All right. And so this is the part where he is almost in the middle of his reign in Judah before all comes crashing down. So Jeremiah sends this word to Seraiah, who is the brother of Baruch. All right. So the brother of Baruch is actually serving King Zedekiah, and Baruch is the scribe of Jeremiah. These two brothers, they live completely different lives. So let's read it. It says, the word which Jeremiah the prophet commanded Seraiah, the son of Neriah, when he went with Zedekiah, the king of Judah, into Babylon in the 4th year of his reign. Now Seraiah was the quartermaster. So Jeremiah wrote in a single scroll all of the evil that should come upon Babylon, even all these words that are written against Babylon. Jeremiah said to Seraiah, when you come to Babylon, then see that you read aloud all of these words and say, O Yahweh, you have spoken against this place to cut it off, that no one will remain in it, neither man nor beast, but that it shall be desolate forever. It shall be that when you have made an end of reading this scroll, that you will bind up a stone to it and cast it in the midst of the Euphrates and say, thus Babylon will sink and will not rise from the disaster that I will bring upon her, and they will become weary. So Jeremiah commissioned the brother of Baruch when he was going with King Zedekiah to Babylon, that he was to speak the words within this scroll and then toss it in the river. And this is so important because before judgment comes, there has to be a witness spoken about it. And so this is what he's calling Seraiah to do. But scriptures do not say whether or not Seraiah actually did this. Chapter 52 is the end of Zedekiah's reign, and it tells us, when he started to reign in Judah, and he reigned for 11 years, and it's in the 11th year that Zedekiah, he tried to rebel against Nebuchadnezzar, and when he tried to run away, then Nebuchadnezzar himself passed judgment on him, and then he killed his sons in front of his eyes, and then gouged out his eyes. He wanted to make sure that that's the last thing that he saw before he took him off to Babylon. And I'm sure that Zedekiah was served as an example of, this is what happens to you if you go against me, right? And so he was an example as he was brought off to Babylon. But it also says that the temple of Yah was burned down, and it says that all of the articles that were in the temple were brought to Babylon, and it just tells of all of the disaster at the very end of King Zedekiah's reign. And when we start reading from verse 24, we will see that Seraiah, the brother of Baruch, is actually killed by the captain guard of Nebuchadnezzar. And it says that the priests and the noblemen, all of them, they were executed by him. And so we don't know if Seraiah ever spoke the words of judgment against Babylon. But nonetheless, we know right now that that judgment happened. And so now I'm going to read from the middle of verse 27. It says, thus Judah was carried away captive out of its land. These are the people whom Nebuchadnezzar carried away captive. It says, in the 7th year, 3,023 Jews. And in the 18th year of Nebuchadnezzar, he carried away captive Jerusalem, 832 persons. And then it says in the 23rd year of Nebuchadnezzar, it says that there were 745 captive persons taken away. And then it says all the persons were 4,600 people taken away captive. And the end of Jeremiah chapter 52 matches up directly with 2 Kings chapter 25, the very end of it. And it tells you the fate of Jehoiachin or Jehoiachin, who was the son of Jehoiakim. He was the one who was taken away captive because Yah said that he would no longer have a seed on the throne. Instead, his uncle, Zedekiah, took the throne instead. And so now we see that the fate of him is actually favor, right? So he changes out of his prison clothes and he gets to sit with the king and he is shown favor. And that is like the glimpse of hope that they have at the end of all of this disaster, that there is one king, right? We see the remnant. There is one who still has favor at the end of all of this destruction. We see that at the very end of this, that actually Nebuchadnezzar did not take that many Jews to Babylonian captivity. That is because there was only a small remnant who went. The rest of them, they rebelled. The rest of them, they died by the sword, by famine, or pestilence. There's only a remnant that survive. And that's something we need to remember as we all come out of Babylon. It's only those who choose to truly follow him and obey his voice. Those are the ones who are the remnant who will be brought into the promise of the millennial reign and New Jerusalem. It is only those who follow his commands, right? And keep the testimony of our Messiah. That has always been the story, and it always will be. Only a remnant survive. Only a remnant will be brought through to the fullness of his promises. Congratulations, Deep and Word family. You have finished another book. I will see you tomorrow for the opening of the book of Ezekiel. Until then, Yah bless.